Femi OK, you're watching the stream. By now, we're all really aware of some basic safety protocol for looking after ourselves during a global pandemic. Wash your hands, wear a mask, social distance. But what happens if you live in communities where you're tightly packed together? You don't have running water, you have limited access to health facilities, and you have limited resources. This pretty much describes the Roma and traveller communities. And during COVID-19, their situations have become even worse. I would love you to be part of this conversation. You know what to do. You can jump into the comment section on YouTube, ask questions, talk to our panel, and be part of today's show. We start with Magda Matake, who is very direct about the biggest challenge facing Roma and traveller communities, and that is racism.
The time for governments to recognize and act upon anti-Roma racism as a health and economic emergency is long overdue. We need stimulus packages, support for essential and informal workers, access to education and healthcare, and on a long term, we need economic anti-racist measures to overcome structural inequalities and anti-Roma racism.
This is such an underreported story. I'm so happy to have these three guests with you to tell us so much more about Roma and traveller communities, particularly at this time. Diana, Shelko, Jonathan, welcome. Diana, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Hello, my name is Diana Pavlovic and I'm a spokesperson for Ketane Movement, Roma and Sinti for Italy, and I'm just in Milan.
So good to have you. Shelko, introduce yourself to our global audience around the world.
Željko Ivanovic. I'm working with the Open Site Foundations, but at the core of our work is the response to what Magda talked about, the response to racism that is a political issue, and our response is political organizing and political participation.
Good to have you. Can't wait to hear more. And Jonathan, good to have you on the stream. Introduce yourself to our viewers.
Hi, Femi. Thanks for having me. My name is Jonathan Lee. I come from a Romani family in South Wales in the United Kingdom, and I work for the European Roma Rights Centre. We're primarily a litigation organisation, so we deal with discrimination cases all over Europe.
Guess I really think that an important place to start is to understand what Roma and traveller life was like pre-pandemic. Because then when you add the pandemic on top of that, you get an extreme situation. Selko, can you give us like a broad understanding of some of the Roma and traveller communities around Europe, how they live and the prejudice that they have to handle?
So for the audience that doesn't know much about Roma, I think it's fair to say at the beginning that our communities came many centuries ago from India, and in Europe, we came in peace. We didn't come like many others to conquer and fight and kill. We came in peace, but we found immense hostility over centuries. This week, we celebrate 165 years after the abolition of slavery in Romania. In many other countries, we faced the systemic racism that Magda Matake mentioned at the beginning. And of course, during the Second World War, where we were persecuted and murdered in Holocaust. Our communities today face multiple times higher unemployment, multiple times higher uneducation. We live in the worst conditions that are at the level of developing, so-called developing countries. Really, in today's Europe that claims to be the most prosperous and most peaceful continent, we face immense violence, discrimination, and racial segregation for many decades. And before COVID, that was a situation of a permanent crisis. For us, COVID just added additional layer.
I'm going to bring in some footage that was filmed at the beginning of February, and this is a Hungarian Roma family, and they talk about how they get their fuel, how they get their heating. Remember, it's during winter time. And then Diana, I would love you to talk about the families that you are working with in Italy and compare and contrast. Let's take a look at this family. They are burning plastic because they don't have enough wood.
papírokat, flakonokat.
If we were to buy the monthly amount of wood, then we would have no money left for food. Therefore, I have to go to the forest or the junkyard, and if we find plastic or rubber, we burn that for fire. But not during the day, or the neighbours can see, and you can also smell it. We throw the rubber and the plastic bottles and such things on at night.
Diana, how are the communities that you know and are working with in Italy, how are they managing during COVID?
Well, let me tell you the concrete example near Milan. There is one small city called Gallarate, and there is one small Sinti family, traveler family that is living in that place for 30 years, that were living in this place for 30 years. They are workers with a very precarious work. All the children were going to school, and just before COVID, the new mayor just decided in one point that he didn't want Roma and Sinti anymore in his city. So he evicted them without any kind of solution, alternative solution. And since then, they're going around in caravans and campers, and they're in the parking lots, chased by the police, practically, that is chasing them and asking them to go away without anything. So they canceled, the local administration canceled them from the local register. So they don't result anymore as citizens of this city, even if they are living there for generations. So when the COVID came, they found themselves without water, and they were going every day in public fountains to take cisterns of water to bring it home, without electricity. So they could not, they were in the cold, they could not heat up themselves. They were totally without any kind of assistance, so they were starving, and the municipality, local administration, didn't want to help them, not even with the food, because they all lost their jobs in the first week of first lockdown in Italy. And 20 kids, 20 children that were regularly going to school just lost any kind of chance to continue to connect and do online school, because of course they didn't have any kind of device, any kind of Wi-Fi, without electricity and whatever. They lost any connection with the school institution for months. And in all this story, they were really from the not so much dramatic situation, in very short time, they became people that are starving, without job, without electricity, without water, without anything. And we estimate that in Italy, we have something like 45,000 people that are living in this kind of conditions. And not to speak also about the big cities as Rome and Naples, where we have these camps that are racial segregation, that you have 2,000, 3,000 people in very, small place. They're all together. So they were really heroes during the COVID period and lockdown period, because in this situation, also the people that are having health problems.
Helping themselves, Diana, because no one was helping them. Jonathan, this pandemic has revealed the fault lines in our societies around the world. We already knew about the prejudice. Were you shocked? Are you shocked? Could you be shocked by what's been happening?
No, I don't think anyone who is either Romani or who works within Romani activism was shocked by this. Just building on something Jellico said earlier about the level of poverty, which I think most Europeans would not imagine that this level of poverty exists in Europe in 2021. And also building what Magda said earlier, it's important that this poverty is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that the poorest people in every single country in Europe happen to be Roma. This is a consequence of centuries of discrimination. And all of the, it's important to understand all of the things that happened during the pandemic the headline-grabbing things, if we talk about police violence, if we talk about treatment, quarantines of Romani neighborhoods, a lot of these things aren't really anything new for Roma, particularly police violence. I mean, the IRC, we currently have around 150 active cases. The largest percentage of those cases that we have are about police brutality. Unfortunately, for many of the most segregated Romani communities, particularly in Eastern Europe, the sight of dawn police raids, tear gas, men in riot gear with batons isn't really anything unfamiliar to them. What this pandemic has done is open people's eyes to this situation.
Jonathan, if I may, I want to warn people that we're about to see something pretty horrific. But you wrote a story for us on Al Jazeera, and I'll come back to that story in a little bit. But it was about the number of hate crimes that have gone up because of lockdown, because no one's paying attention, right? Nobody's out there paying attention, watching. And also the number of racist attacks that were happening as well. There's one in particular that I want you to talk about, which was the beating by a police chief of Roma people. And it's awful. So I'm going to play that video. They're screaming, okay, everybody. So if you don't want to watch this, I'll give you enough time to walk away. And then, Jonathan, come off the back of the video and give us your thoughts. Let's take a look. Jonathan.
So what you could see there was in Bolantin Vale in Romania. The gendarmes, the national police, were called out because Roma were seen having a barbecue outside their home. It was against lockdown measures, but the response from police was to send an armed squad there, drag the men out of the houses, nylon tie their hands behind their back and put them on the floor. And then it's just out of shot. But what they're actually doing is two officers, one of which is the chief of police of the town, is beating the soles of the man's feet with his shoes off. At the time, people who were filming were warned of consequences if they were to release this. And to be honest, you mentioned if we were shocked by things like this before. This isn't, I mean, this would be a bad case that we get, but this kind of abuse is not uncommon, particularly in Romania, but also where we had lots of cases in Slovakia, in Serbia, in Bulgaria. And as I mentioned in this article, that while the most extreme lockdown measures were in force, sort of April, May last year, this was when racist police officers knew no one is watching, no activists are coming into the field, media are relying on someone like me to tell them on the phone, and the judiciary is paralyzed, so no one's going to go to court over this. And they really were aware. It was disheartening to see how quickly it turned to this when they knew the eyes of the world were not watching them.
I want to go to YouTube, Zeljko and Diana, and put this to you. This is from Liban Mohammed. And Liban says Roma children need good schools and health services. Let's start with the health services, Zeljko. Is that possible? Can that be something that comes out of this COVID-19 situation where the healthcare available to Roma and traveller community is so bad that it has to get better because of COVID-19?
Right. Well, that's exactly what is at the core of our analysis, that the Roma face specifically higher risks than any other group in Europe because of our pre-existing conditions. Just to illustrate, the life expectancy among the Roma in comparison to the rest of the population is shorter between 7 to 20 years. So that is just a result of the deprivation in which people live, the living conditions that are inhuman in segregated settlements. 30% of people in Roma communities in Europe live without water, 46 without toilet and bathroom within the houses. And these settlements are usually overcrowded, homes are overcrowded, and in this environment, of course, the child mortality rate is higher than average population at the level of developing countries. That's why the health risks for Roma population are much higher during COVID because of pre-existing conditions and because of the access to healthcare that is most of the time characterized by the racism by the doctors. Our study in 2017 done by Gallup shows that among all the public institutions, among all civil servants, the medical staff is by far the most racist against the Roma. Also, half of the population.
What do they do? What do they do? How would medical staff be racist against patients? That's not their job. Their job is to treat fairly. That's what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
What are they doing that's racist?
So first of all, we have settlements in Bulgaria like Sliven, where basically the ambulance doesn't come to the Roma settlements. And this is also the situation with Serbia, with Italy, with Macedonia, with Hungary. These settlements are remote, and most of the times when Roma call, they don't necessarily get the service. Also, when they approach the doctors, they are unwelcome. They are shouted, especially Romani women that are in particularly difficult situation in Roma communities. On top of that, half of the population doesn't have health insurance. That presents just another administrative reason for people to not get the equal treatment.
All right. I'm going to get us to move forward now, because you're not just sitting there documenting all of these terrible prejudices and biases and basically racism. You're also asking and really asking for change. Let me just play this to you, Diana. This is Cyprian. And then I'm really curious about what now you're doing, what you're hoping to do, knowing what you know about Roma and traveller communities during COVID. Here's Cyprian.
No one left behind. That's the slogan of the European Commission for recovery measures. Well, unfortunately, Roma has been slaves here in Romania for 500 years, and only 165 years this was abolished. We are going to celebrate that together with Black Lives Matter on 20th of February. However, the situation in Roma communities was really dramatic, and that's because access to education, access to health, access to labor, and access to housing and water supply was really problematic in most of our communities, because poverty was really something that was amplified during the pandemic period.
Diana,
Well,
now what do you do? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, well, there is something very important that I want to say before telling you what are our fights and our recommendations in regards education and Roma peoples. I mean, in Italy, in this case, because we had the research on a national level, and we realized that 40% of Roma kids during the first lockdown in Italy was never, ever contacted, not even once, by the schools, by their own schools. So we can say for sure that 40% of Roma kids in Italy is totally cut out from the educational system. And all this together with the big problems that the people are telling to us, that for example, many schools, hundreds of people are telling us many schools are refusing Roma kids that wanted to register in the schools in Italy. So this is not only huge violation of human rights and children's fundamental rights in one of the most important countries of Europe, and this is not only problems for Roma, because we lose our future like this. If our kids are not able to go to school, and they're cut out from educational system, it's so huge measure, we are losing our future. But this is also a problem for the state. I mean, if in 10 years these children will be adults, will be persons, and if you exclude them now from educational system, in 10 years you will have relevant economic cost and huge social cost for the state. So I think this is also an opportunity for us now to say that it's true. We are in dramatic situation. We were before in dramatic situation. Now we are the really dramatic situation. But this is also an opportunity for us and for our states to realize that after COVID period and recovery, is an opportunity not only to include Roma in the society, but also to us to be a resource and help for the recovery of our states. And we want to be that. We want to be propositive. We want to do that. And we are expecting from our nation states to use us and a resource, as a persons that can contribute to the future of our countries.
I'm so glad you said that, because you're echoing a sentiment that Julian, who spoke to us earlier, also echoed. He's like, we have the documentation, we know what has been going on. Now we're handing over to you authorities. Now you need to act. Here's Julian.
COVID-19 had negatively impacted the situation of Roma in Ukraine. Limited access to medical services, poor housing, and lesser job opportunities are key challenges that Roma face in Ukraine. Discrimination got also intensified, especially in the online sphere. Hate speech was used by public figures and was also met with impunity. From our side, we document and monitor such cases, and we urge the Ukrainian authorities to provide firm and resolute response to these shameful things as discrimination and hatred.
Now, you may remember earlier that I said that Jonathan wrote a piece for AlJazeera.com. Police are using COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse to abuse Roma. Remarkably, though, this piece ends on an optimistic note. Jonathan?
Optimistic in that, so the ERC, our business is suing racists, I would say. We take racist authorities, institutions, police forces to court when they abuse the rights of Roma. I don't know if it's an optimism, but what we've seen from
about it being,
this pandemic,
you talk about this situation being an opportunity to do better.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not feeling optimistic after this show. I don't blame you.
Maybe it's been a little longer, but what's been different about the wave of police violence now is, which I think might be partly attributable actually to Black Lives Matter, is that in the past we would always struggle to litigate police violence because there was no evidence. And something that's been happening a lot more now is people have been doing that. They've been pulling out a phone and filming, even when police threaten them and threaten their families, threaten to remove their children, everything you can imagine. There's still a few brave people are filming this and putting it on the internet. And what that means is it's much more irrefutable evidence that we have then when we try and bring cases against racist police forces.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate all of you for joining us here on the stream today to talk about it's a really depressing topic. But the more we talk about it, the more it's out in the open, the more that COVID-19 shines a light on it, the more likely people are to appreciate what is going on with Roma and traveller communities around the world. Our guests are amazing, aren't they? We're wrapping up. There's always more to talk about, but let me show you this. I'm literally at the end of the show, so I'm so sorry. But we will continue this. This will not be the last show. We're going to talk to, and we've been listening to Jonathan Lee. And also Zelko, and also Diana. That's where you can find them online. They have more to say, but for now, I am going to wrap up. Thank you for your comments on YouTube. I will see you next time on the Stream Home Edition. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.